Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice of radio. So today, we're going to be looking at a lovely little new item card. It's a brand new item card. It's been translated by David Hochmann, who else? And it's so much fun. There are going to be some really awkward, annoyingly, funly, great things you can do with this. It's called Surprise Box, and according to David, it reads, choose a card from your opponent's discard pile. Your opponent puts that card into their hand. You make your opponent pick up a card from their discard pile. Now, of course, if you wanted to be super nice, you'd be like, oh, hello, Mr. Opponent. I see you're playing Zoroark. Would you like a double colorless energy? But having said that, this is not really what we're going to be doing with this. This is one of these weird cards that for your average, ordinary, everyday, run-of-the-mill garden variety deck is a little bit weird. And it's one that newer players may look at and go, I'm not entirely sure why you would use this. But there are a number of incredibly specific interactions where this just becomes awesome. And let's start off with Malamar, because we looked at Malamar yesterday, and I, for one, genuinely, I'm excited about Malamar, and I know I'm excited about a lot of cards, but look, I love Pokemon, and I'm an excitable fellow. Of course I'm going to be excited about lots of new Pokemon cards. But the new Malamar, this new Malamar is great. What it does for a single Darkness Energy lets you look at your opponent's hand, choose a Pokemon you find there, and discard it, and then use whatever attack you want from that Pokemon. Now, what I said yesterday was, well, sometimes this is going to be good, sometimes it's going to be bad, and I suggested using the stadium card Lavender Town, which lets you look at your opponent's hand once per turn, so that you could make sure they had a good Pokemon in their hand. Well, Surprise Box goes even further than that. Surprise Box basically says, if they've got a Pokemon in their discard pile that you want to use an attack from, then you put it in their hand, then you use Malamar, and for a single energy, you can use any attack of any Pokemon they've got in their discard pile. It's awesome, ladies and gentlemen. But look, you can see the artwork as well as I can. We know that there is a Gengar on the artwork, and to be fair, I know a lot of you listen to these videos more than watch them as you're pottering around, but look at the screen, you can see there's a Gengar in there. And we are getting Mimikyu and Gengar Tag Team GX. And that has got an attack for 2 Psychic Energy that does 50 damage for each trainer card in your opponent's hand. So what you can do here is pick up a trainer card. Obviously, you try and pick one that wasn't useful. Maybe a Rescue Stretcher when they don't have any Pokemon in the discard pile. Or an Ultra Ball when they don't want to discard any cards from their hand and they've got a full bench of Pokemon. Things of that nature. Maybe a Professor Round's Lecture when they've already got their basics out. Put it in their hand, it clogs up their hand, and then you get to do an extra 50 damage using Mimikyu and Gengar Tag Team GX. Gengar and Mimikyu, I should say. And of course, if we're talking about Poltergeist, don't forget that we do have the Trevenant from Guardians Rising, which also has the same Poltergeist attack. A little bit weaker, but then again, it only gives up 1 prize rather than 3. I shall leave that to you lovely ladies and gentlemen to work out. And Mimikyu and Gengar's really is one of the obvious ones here, and I think... And look, Mimikyu and Gengar Tag Team GX is already proving to be pretty good over in Japan. One of the videos I've got queued up that I'm desperately trying to find time to upload, but there's so much news lately, is about a Mimikyu and Gengar Tag Team GX deck that's gone and won over in Japan. So, it's already a good deck, and this just makes it better. But we can get a little bit more obscure with this, and ladies and gentlemen, you know I'm a fan of this. How about Dusknoir? I love Dusknoir. Now, this is the one from Burning Shadows that's seen rather a little, well, almost no play up to now. It's got the ability Dark Invitation. Once during your turn before you attack, you may have your opponent reveal their hand, put a basic Pokemon you find there onto your opponent's bench, and put 3 damage counters onto that Pokemon. Now what you could do is use this kind of like target whistle, whereby you're just getting a Pokemon back onto their bench, except with free damage counters. Maybe you're just clogging up their bench, and if you really want maximum effect, get something like a Tapu Lele. So it's clogging up their bench, but they don't get the ability, and then it's down to 140 HP, and it still gives up 2 prizes. Sounds like fun. But what you could do here is just use it against something like Magikarp. You see, something like Magikarp is awesome because it's got 30 HP. And we just saw Gyarados doing really well and winning over in Harrogate. That's another video coming in the next day or two. I promise it's definitely going to happen. Too much news. And I told you about the new Gyarados coming out, link to that video in the description, which is also looking really good, but there's no such thing as a 40 HP or a 50 HP or a 90 HP Magikarp. I'd quite like to see a 90 HP Magikarp. What we have, there's a 300 HP Magikarp and Wailord, but we all know that the majority of that is Wailord. It's kind of 270 Wailord, 30 Magikarp. So you can just use this to get easy KOs, and not through an attack, through an ability. So what you essentially do is you play Surprise Box, make your opponent pick up a Magikarp, and then you use Dusknoir's ability to put the Magikarp on the bench with free damage counters, and the Magikarp goes straight back to the discard pile, but you get to take a prize. Gyarados has just proven to be good. It won like a 500-person regional, the biggest in Europe. And there's that new deck that's going to be played in, well, it's already being played in Japan. People are going to try it over here. And we end up in this great situation where you can actually be cheating the prize race. And yes, I know stage 2s are a little bit of a pain at the moment, but might I remind you about Alolan Ninetales? Because actually, Alolan Ninetales is making stage 2s more viable than they've been in formats. So Dusknoir's quite good. I'll give you one more, and this one, I had actually missed this one myself. This was the lovely Code64X over on Twitter. It's Persian. The Persian which is going to be coming out in Team Up. Now this one's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more convoluted, but essentially it's got an ability whereby you can look at your opponent's hand and discard cards until they've only got 4 remaining for a single colourless energy, and it also does 20 damage. So if you can play 4 of these at the same time, you can put 4 crummy cards that your opponent doesn't want in their hand, and then use Persian to discard the rest of their hand. I will pop a link to my Persian video in the description as well. Now that one's a little bit sillier, a little bit more convoluted. But the point is, this could be a fantastically disruptive card. Code64 himself described the card as insane, and you know what? I don't know how much I can disagree with this. So let's go rapid fire and just go a couple other interactions. I've given you my favourites, but there are a couple of others we can look at. So there is, of course, the Sylveon that came out in Forbidden Light. Your opponent reveals their hand, and essentially you get to copy a supporter card from their hand. So if there's a particular supporter you want to copy, you can. And it might be something like Team Skull Grunt that you're not playing but there are, and you can take advantage of it in that way. And while we're talking about this, how about Sabrina's Suggestion, which is essentially the same thing, link in the description, but as a supporter card. Look at your opponent's hand, choose a supporter you find there, and use it. I should say Sylveon discards a supporter, whereas Sabrina, you just get to use it, it doesn't discard it. And if you want a real one, which I think a lot of you have probably forgotten, and again, I've got to give Code64X credit for this one, Zygarde GX. No, not that Zygarde, that Zygarde. Whose attack does, well, GX attack, 2 fighting, 2 colourless energy, 120 for each energy card in their hand, and you can use this nicely as well. I like this card. I've given you a bunch of uses for it, and the reality is you're probably not playing Zygarde, but you may well be playing Mimikyu and Gengar, because that's a great deck. And Malamar is a great tech in Malamar decks, and this works beautifully in that. And something like Dusk Noir that otherwise might not be good enough actually just really comes into its own here. The fact that you can use Lavender Town to look at your opponent's hand is nice and really does help so many of these Pokemon that I've mentioned today. But the fact that you can now put whatever card you like into your opponent's hand first, this, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely beautiful. I'm giving it 4 wussies. I think it could end up being better than that. This looks like one of those item cards that will not be played in every deck. There's going to be loads of decks that don't play this, but it also does feel like this is a card which is going to completely make some crazy decks that may not otherwise be good enough great. I love this card. It's one of my favorite new items I've seen in a long time. But I would like to know what you think about it. So please do let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, but I would please ask you to remember the most important rule of all. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays. We're over 3,000 subs, but as I've told you in my recent videos, I'm a greedy man. I'd like some more. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.